Good morning, everybody. Today is Tuesday, November 5th, 2024. We are at the Podman Community Cabal meeting. Today we have two topics. As of now, we're happy to take some more if folks want to. The first one up, we'll be talking about improving the ease of contribution from Matt Heen. And then Roy Golan, who I'm not sure if he's here, added a Quadlet management topic, which I don't know a whole lot about. I just discovered a little while ago, so we'll see if Roy comes in or not. So Matt, you do?
I know enough to
Discuss it anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I think he's actually he might be coming to the other Cabal, the one next week.
All right. Well, maybe we can talk about it a little bit and move on and see where it goes. So Matt, I will hand it to you.
Okay, sure. So as some people may have noticed, we have been doing a big cleanup to a lot of our user-facing documentation around contributing to the project, especially Podman, but really all containers repos. And this is just us noticing that some of these docs hadn't been changed in 7 years, really. And it's probably a good idea to get things up to date and make it an inviting environment for new people to contribute to the project. Because I know we've had, in the past, it has been difficult to get PRs into Podman, and we'd really like to change that. So this is basically an open discussion of how do we make it more inviting for people to contribute, especially to Podman, but also to our other repos. And I think that right now we're focusing on making the documentation easier for people so that first timers can get PRs in easier. But a lot of the people working on this have been Podman maintainers for a very long time. So our visibility into what the new user experience is like isn't exactly the greatest.
I think one thing that is missing in Podman is sort of a architecture overview, and code structure. Like if you look at the repo, like where do you start looking if you have a bug, right? So it's just some basic docs, like we have cmd/podman is the CLI infrastructure, and then you have Flippod with the integrated parts of running the containers and so on. I think that this is probably pretty difficult to figure out as a beginner.
Okay. What do you want to do with this information, Matt? Do you want to put it in?
Tom, I believe, is taking notes, so we will have a record at the end of this of anything that we decided on. I think we have an architecture diagram for all our projects identified as a priority. But that's not exactly what Paul's saying. Paul wants some internal code documentation as well, where we can say this is where the Podman core container management lives, and this is where the API lives. I think that's different, and I don't think that is something I would really like to do. I don't think it would take particularly long just to do it. Like, this is the introduction to the Podman repo. This is where our important stuff lives. This is where the tests live. This is how you should add a new feature if you want to. I think that's a very reasonable thing.
I would agree.
My question
I'd be happy actually to take a card on that.
Okay.
As long as it doesn't need to be done in the next 2 weeks.
That could be arranged.
Yeah.
I wonder where this should live. I mean, it could be a .md, but this could just as easily be a blog we put out that's like, this is the intro to how to contribute to Podman. This is the things you should do. This is where all the code lives. I feel like a blog would be useful here, although we could link it to other places.
My personal feeling would be some form of a extension of the contributing doc that's already in the repo. That's the permanent home. But I also think a blog that kind of summarizes that content would be something that we could get out there and wouldn't have to be all the nitty-gritty detail. Absolutely.
Yeah,
On both.
I think it needs to live in the repo because you need to update it with as the code changes. A blog might be nice advertising, but we have a lot of old blogs out there which people cite to, and we say, well, that's just no longer how you do it. So
just want to say something, Jan, not to put you front of the line, as you recently started contributing, maybe you have some ideas of like where we are missing some things and things like that. So if you would like to share that, that would be useful as well.
Well, the architecture overview, I agree with that, and also that missing documentation is started creating. So I think it's on the good way, and right now I haven't got anything else.
I have an old acorn I can bring up, which is I still think that for a contributor who even does just a doc change, validate or getting a sense that your PR might actually pass all our hoops locally before you push it, it's still a big hurdle. That's been kind of since we got CI that was more difficult than make validate or something, and we get contributors that are on Windows and Mac. I think to me that's still an issue.
I would question if they care, though. Like if they would actually spend the time running this. Sometimes I have the feeling that most
especially
are
for
not reading
little things, right?
I think on the limping and some of the DCO checks and things like that, that to me is 3/4 of what we end up having to go back to people on. So if a contributing doc said, if you want to contribute, here's the process. And oh, by the way, before you run it, before you push it, run a make validate because it checks for the ticky marks you need. It is bothersome to me that we can't always run our integration suite locally. Like it has to be run in a very specific environment for it to pass. That's bothersome to me, but I think the bigger part is if we can wipe out, I'll say, the paperwork portion of a submission.
Yeah, but I mean, I agree with the DCO thing, but like that's in the doc. So everybody that hasn't edited hasn't read the doc, So it's what I'm trying to get at. We can make. I agree. A simple make validate. I'm not sure what the problem with the current make validate is. I guess you mentioned like Mac and Windows. I guess that's fair. Yeah, I don't know how to solve that really. It's.
I agree. It doesn't make it probably doesn't make a difference in the long run. We're still going to have that, but it's a lot easier to go see the contributing doc than to walk them through all the things that they need to do if we actually have a command that works. Or just even go in there and say run make validate. Building on top of that is the second one. I think it's half our responsibility, half contributors, particularly new ones we're seeing now, is we're getting drive-by PRs, which is good. But what we're not getting is those merged.
Yeah.
And that's not that there is more delay in reviewing than I think we would be happy with these days. But I think the other piece is we're not getting, the reason I use drive-by is because we're not getting like a second return after they submit and we review. They're not going and doing it. We may need to nudge them a fair amount. I don't know if there's something we can do there, but I would say that is a problem worth looking at.
And that's oftentimes the DCL issues that they've run into, and they never come back to tweak it. It's like, it's a simple thing. You guys take care of it. Bye. See ya.
I mean, I think you can categorize a contributor in two parts. Somebody who, identified the problem and decided to, like, here's a fix, but I don't actually have the motivation to, become a contributor to the project, like, permanent or whatever. And somebody who would like to, contribute like more often, or like, understand the whole flow and so on. We don't know what the person wants, right? If they sort of give you this one fix, you take it, and I would be happy, to just finish it, but I don't know what the motivation of the contributor was. So.
Yep. And then I guess one thing that I've been questioning about with the new PRs coming in from the from the review side, which maybe suggests we have a problem, is I don't typically review stuff that doesn't pass tests or isn't very close to passing tests. If I see a DCO or something like that, I just stop. What's the rest of the team doing? Because that might be handy to mention in the contributing, like, we don't really go and review stuff till it's.
That's especially problematic, Brett, because a lot of this some of these are waiting on a reviewer to look at it and add the bloat approved label, or add the, what do you call it? It's one of our other no test needed labels. So CI being read is not a guarantee that it's not good for review. I do go in and I try and look at all PRs to the extent that I can understand at least why CI is failing.
I do too. I'm not saying that I don't see the little green dot and move on. I'm saying I don't review if it's, I'm actually the one that's been putting a lot of the no new tests on their approval. So I do look at those, but I don't, if it's actually failing tests, then I don't typically go much further, because I don't know if it's valuable. I would lean towards whatever the team thinks we should be doing, as long as the team's consistent.
It's a hard trade-off. Sometimes you want to look at it and say, oh, this approach is completely wrong, rewrite it before starting to fix tests. And sometimes just the tests are enough to show that there is more work to be done.
I think the difficult problem for contributors is figuring out, like, how to navigate the test log, how to even figure out that they have a failure that is waiting on them, right? Because if few check marks will be read for flakes, right? And if the contributor is looking into a flake, oh, what did I broke, and start debugging things, that's totally wasteful of time when I go there and, oh yeah, that's this flake. I restarted it, right? So I don't know. I try to look at all the PRs, regardless if they pass tests or not, and then usually I just copy and paste the failure into PR comment for them, so they see what's going on and see how they respond.
I mean, I think it's a good template if we all do it. I will always look at why it failed as well. If it's a flake, I'll rerun it. And I think we need more maintainers going through that pipeline throughout the day. Because as you well know, that flakes can occur at any given time, whatever. So if Paul and I are the only ones pushing buttons, let's just say, it's going to be largely done in the US morning, and then not get attention thereafter, because that's usually when I go through PRs. Paul, I like the idea of pasting the failure if we were doing a review to help out. or explicitly saying this is not a flake.
Yeah.
You have a test failure. If that's something we can put in practice, I think that immediately helps contributors.
We can maybe what we can do is that we can responsibilize, so make it the contributor more responsible and saying like having an default messages that say we're not gonna look at your PR until the tests are green. If you think that there is a flake, because flake can happen, and we can provide a command that will kind of ping us, because the contributor may think that that there is a flake and he cannot do anything. And today, like, I think a contributor is expecting us to look for flakes, but if we tell him, hey, we may not have the time to look at all the flakes, so if you think it's a flake, please tell us, so that we are aware about it and we're going to look at it. But usually we look at PRs if all the tests are passing.
Yeah, but even that is difficult in a sense. What, how would they know if it's a flake or not? And it's, for me, it takes me 5 seconds to decide if a test is a flake or not. Like, at most. Like, if I see on the GitHub message, I see the test name, I thought before that it was a flake, I press rerun, right? But, expecting that from somebody else that doesn't work. And generally for integration and system tests, it's pretty easy to say, like, if it's only one that's red, it's probably not. It's probably a flake. And if you have a bunch of reds, it's not a flake. But even that doesn't need to be true, and it's not true for, I don't know, machine tests where we only have one Hyper-V run, right? Either you have a real Hyper-V failure or you have a flake in Hyper-V. So you cannot generalize these kinds of scenarios. I don't know.
Yeah, the thing is that if we are the only one looking at if the contributor feels like he should not look at the test, because anyway we are the one looking at the test logs, so then we'll need to look at all the results of the test. I think that we should tell them, hey, please go ahead and look yourself. You may not understand everything. But if there is there are a lot of things that are understandable, especially if there is a linting problem. And it's helpful that the contributor starts looking and learning how to look at the logs of the CI test, of the PR test, because that's the path to becoming a contributor anyway. He needs to understand how the CI works. But I think that today we do not guide him at all. We do not say, hey, like, for example, something that I figure out after like a few weeks and I didn't know, like the HTML file that helps you a lot figuring out what's going on in the test. So this is something that is completely hidden. It's not, we do not disclose that in our documentation or contributing guides.
One other thing that's been weighing my mind, and I'll just ask the whole group, has anyone worked? We have this changes requested thing in GitHub as well. Has anyone worked with a repository or a project where if a maintainer puts a label or a label exists on a PR, that the users remove labels, or is that project?
No, they cannot.
By project.
You need to give them permissions to triage permissions are needed, I believe. Or
so what I'm
maybe more.
Yeah. So what I'm getting at is, I think for me, when I look at we have a lot of PRs now. And if it were to pick up, this would be even worse. But, you know, I keep going back to the same PR and it hasn't moved. So, you know, it'd be nice to know when it has moved as a maintainer on the maintainer side. But I'm guessing that the contributors have very little opportunity to, like I said, remove a label or do something that would bump it.
So they can request a review from a user. I believe that's possible. But then they would know what to request from. Technically, the bot, the OpenShift bot, is randomly listing one of the owners, right?
Yeah.
Where they say, hey, assign that person. I don't think anybody pays attention to that.
Yeah. Because, I mean, there is a lot of time loss in going through the same set of PRs that you've been going through, hoping or waiting for that to do something.
Yeah, so generally, if I edit a comment or like then I get the notifications, right? So I generally don't check again. Or you don't even have to add a comment. You could subscribe, but if you subscribe, like you get all the forced push comments while they fix stuff. So that's not really what you're looking for either, right?
Yeah.
They're still iterating on their fix.
I'm trying to help the user by having less noise on us. Okay.
Any other thoughts or comments on this topic before we move on? Just checking here to see if Roy has come aboard. I do not see Roy. Brent,
He did.
I thought I saw him ping through, but I'm not seeing him. No.
It looks like he dropped. He was in the meeting, definitely, but he is no longer.
It might be worth Tom seeing if you can ping him and we could just wait a minute.
You said he's a Red Hat person, huh?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally to me, the problem with reviewing is this, what I mentioned, that there are the two types of persons. I don't know if it's worth spending a bunch of time explaining, you know, how to do that stuff. And then they never come back because they don't have to. It's their right. It's totally fine. But
yeah, I think you have to take away the.
Yeah.
You have to take away the I didn't know what to do portion though. When you run a big project, then you're gonna have drive-bys. All right, Tom. While you're doing that, I can maybe talk about what the other topic was because it did come to me first.
Yeah, I did ping him, but he's turned his notifications off. I don't know where he is.
So we won't get terribly far, but I'll float the generalized idea of this was that he had essentially a CLI for maintaining Quadlets. Just really sort of simplifying some of the what do you have, how to, you know, etc. So if you can, I guess it kind of equates to a lot of the Podman commands that we have where, you know, we have an image store and we like to be able to list them and do all the inspection and all the other kinds of things. And he's got that in a separate repo, and he asked me whether I thought this kind of function would be attractive to either Podman or to some sort of Quadlet itself. But essentially, is that him? No. He was basically asking whether or not, you know, this topic or this kind of thing would be appropriate for Podman or Quadlet itself. And then my response was, I think it's a great Cabal topic. So that's how we kind of got here. So we can generally debate, although I would feel more comfortable if there were more Quadlet folks. We can generally debate whether this would be something useful or not. And I can meanwhile try to go find the repository while you guys, it looks like Dan's going to talk. So I'll go look for it.
This is different than Podlet, or is this
Paul's got it here. Let me just look to see if this is it. Yep, this is it. That's it, pal. Thank you. So if you go look there, you get kind of an idea. And again, I was not anything I thought about it was not a response of that exact thing is a great idea. I was sort of trying to bubble it up to, do we think this is appropriate for, you know, what we know about Quadlet and what we offer to folks? And would it be a good thing? So it's not exactly, is that what we want? Is this topic something valuable? And should we talk about it?
I think the user experience here is an unambiguous win over Quadlets right now. So honestly, my position is, why aren't we doing this already?
Yeah, I'm trying to make sense of what exactly it's doing, but yeah, I mean, listing this stuff, listing your files or like adding a new file, and it's sort of just batching a bunch of commands, right? Move the file in this directory, reload systemctl, and install it and stuff like that. Certainly useful for users, I guess. I don't know what else it's doing, or like, what.
Dan, you were a big Quadlet supporter, in on it early.
Yeah. No, I think it's an interesting idea. People hear the word Quadlet and it's difficult to find the word Quadlet inside of Podman. So this would bring it more to the forefront. There is a tool called Podlet, which also does something similar in that it generates a Quadlet from a container. So having a Podman Quadlet list and looking at the Quadlets that are installed in the system, and making it easier for users to install them and manage them. If we want to make it more of a first-class citizen, I think that would be useful.
It also opens up more long-term, like you said, to you could clearly see Podman Quadlet generate from a running container, like as an example. There are a couple other people, obviously the Quadlet folks, but there are a couple other people I'd actually like to bounce this off. Ben Briard is a huge Quadlet fan, so and a container guy, so I think it would be good to bounce off him. I'll take that one.
So one thing I would don't know, I wouldn't like this as part of a Podman command, because Quadlet itself is sort of systemd Linux only, right? And then if everything you add to Podman pretty much nowadays is remote client, or like should work via remote client rather, right? So even if you say it's only working local, some document out there says Podman something, and somebody's gonna type it on Windows, Mac OS, whatever, right? So I think having these things separate.
Is that a bad thing?
I think it's a very bad thing that people don't understand that there is Podman remote and Podman local.
No, I get that, but is it a bad thing? I mean, I would think Mac users would want to be able to run a Quadlet.
Oh, it's systemd.
I know,
Run
but
it on the VM.
Run on the VM or whatever the remote connection is.
Yeah,
You're gonna have an issue. There are going to be issues with that if you want to allow Podman Quadlet install. Now all of a sudden you're going to be. I mean, we can do it. It's all can be done.
Sure. And we could also make it. We could also make it only on Linux.
Yeah.
We could go out the door that way and just see whether it takes off or not.
Yeah,
okay.
It might be helpful to have an error message when someone types Podman Quadlet on a Mac to say this is a Linux only feature.
Sure.
Yeah, we can definitely provide that. I
Or
would love to do a trial implementation in Podman local, and then if we get success with that, we can easily spin it or do extra work to get it remote.
we could also do what we did with Compose, which is if a primary is there, then we honor it, and if not, we don't.
Yeah.
Lots of ways around that. I think we focus on whether we think this is a solid idea. It sounds like
Oh,
we wouldn't have to do all the lifting here.
Do you know if you have Quadlets installed in your machine?
Do I?
Yeah. I'm just, if you played with Quadlets in the past, you have to go look at a weird directory to figure out if they're installed.
Yep. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
But also on the flip side, the fact that it is somewhat standardized to the weird directory allows us to write Wrapup.
Right. I'm just saying it'd be nice to be able to get that information through
Yeah, absolutely.
a list command. Show me what I have installed.
I could also theoretically see stock piece, sort of a Quadlet over a URL. So someone could have it sitting in a GitHub repository and snork it right in.
I personally don't like to absorb everything into like main Podman and stuff like that, because functionality wise I have no objections, or that something like that is useful, but like every line that is added into Podman puts burden onto us, and I don't know. It's I see bug reports for things nobody pay attention to, and I don't want even more things. Nobody.
I just think Quadlet's kind of a special case. I was just in a discussion on Finch as a competitor to Podman. I think Brent was involved in a little bit, and Quadlet is a feature of Podman that is pretty popular and very different than
unique
everybody else in the market right now.
Yeah.
And so rather than hiding that, we should probably embrace it, as opposed to all the rest of the time we're playing catch up. Oh, we gotta get Compose support.
So Tom, if I was to summarize, I'd say we like the idea. We don't know anything about the implementation, and design doc required. Does anyone want to disagree with we don't like the idea? We like the idea rather. Okay. If that gentleman comes to the other Cabal or whatever, I told him he could come to a team meeting too. It doesn't matter.
There's another one, Dry Run, which is built into Quadlet, which sort of proofreads a Quadlet, which we don't have now. That'd be kind of nice to be able to debug your Quadlet before you push it into production. What kind of service is this Quadlet going to generate? I'd even help us for testing.
Testing, muting. I think we're at the end of the discussion. Does anybody have anything further to say or add to it?
I like the idea. I think we need to. I'm forgetting the name of the guy who created this tool, but I would really like to talk to him, and if we can get him in another Cabal, that would be great.
Yeah, Roy Golan. He's apparently in Europe somewhere. I'm not sure exactly.
Yeah. I was hesitant to say Roy because it could be Wah, but
yep. My apologies if I've misspoken.
Yeah, likewise.
He's in Israel.
Right. So all that. Good talk on that. So let's see if there are any open discussions. Anybody has any topics they'd like to add before we head out?
We got our monthly Dan. Hey, Dan. Good to see you.
I'm actually working on a pull request for Podman right now. So I'm trying to figure out why my QBMO is not working anyways.
Okay, while we're still thinking about that, I will point out that our next meeting for the Cabal is on January 7th, 2025. Already, the year's coming to a close. And our next community meeting is on December 3rd, 2024, same time, 11 o'clock both times, and on Tuesdays. So one last call for any other topics. Otherwise, I will close this one out. All right, folks, thanks for coming today. And we'll shut down the recording.